What has stirred up this latest swell of anti-immigrant sentiment in Northern Ireland is a knife attack by a black man against a white man.
Wrong! Wrong! Wrong!
I am sickened, yet not surprised at how many people, be it state news, independents, your local podcast bro, or just a TikTok thought, are all trying to make this Belfast thing, the attempted murder of Stephen Ogilvy. They're all trying to make this about racism. They're trying to claim it's the Troubles 2.0, the same crap they did with Jim Crow, despite both being totally different things, which in this case is impacting every country foolish enough to allow infinite unvetted immigrants in. And while some people might be racist, this is not about race. It's about violence. And if those most prone to committing violence happen to be coming from African or Middle Eastern nations, and you want to blame this on race, then you are saying those people are genetically predisposed to violence. I, on the other hand, am blaming their culture, not their color. These people rioting in Ireland's streets, these thugs, as they're called, the fascists, they weren't doing so before Hadi al-Odid, a 30-year-old Sudanese man who was hiding in Ireland as an asylee, attempted to brutally murder Stephen Ogilvy in the middle of the street. The people in the UK, they weren't rioting before Henry Noack's body cam footage showed him disbelieved unto death by the cops who were supposed to protect him from his killer. They rioted after these incidents happened. That isn't an act of racism. It's an act of survival. Their government is supposed to be protecting them, and yet it offers protection to foreigners and migrants with unassimilated offspring from half a world away, and we see now the citizens are paying the price. A sacrifice would not be an understatement, considering the footage of the attack looked more like a ritualistic act than battery, assault, or even attempted murder. The constant attempt to reframe this is irritating.
The alleged attacker is from Sudan, not Somalia. Police had incorrectly identified him as Somali earlier.
Okay, sure, but a Sudanese person and a Somalian person would both be black, so what's the distinction exactly? Culture? Intelligence? They are correcting it to Sudanese as if to identify this inaccurate claim that they're Somalian as a vector for racism, but they're both black. And it's not as if a Sudanese person is less likely to do this than a Somalian person. They're correcting the narrative not to be accurate, but to frame it in a certain way, as if to say, well, actually, he's Japanese. But a Japanese person wouldn't be doing it, though. There wouldn't be a story. That's the distinction mainstream media intentionally blinds themselves to during their informative breakdowns. It's explicitly because he's Sudanese. Not because he's black, because he's Sudanese. See, major governments from other countries have a do-not-travel order levied upon Sudan, urging their citizens to GTFO ASAP, and not for some trite reason like when they recommended people to avoid the USA to spite Trump and ICE and fluster their Democratic voter base, but because Sudan is a hellhole currently embroiled in a 4-year civil war with a massive food shortage, which is being blamed on a lack of fertilizer from the Strait of Hormuz being closed, despite the country being in a civil war for 4 years. I think one of those things happened before the other, but what do I know? There's just corpses littering the ground in this video. Marco Rubio is talking about giving humanitarian aid to this place, and activists are saying that we haven't done enough for Sudan's neediest. Do you think there's even one person in Sudan who knows the name Stephen Ogilvy? Of course I pity the innocent people of Sudan affected by both our war and their own, but that's neither here nor there, so let's not pretend a country of origin isn't important for allowing migrants. It is. Al-Odid came from a literal battleground where every square foot is considered dangerous, and he was let in as an asylee for, I'm guessing, no reason whatsoever. The riots in Belfast aren't about them being black. They're about them being violent immigrants. If all of these immigrants were coming from China, the leftist narrative would be about them being yellow. If they were all locals, then it would be an out-of-control crime problem caused by the right, I'm sure. And if they were women causing most of the violence, then the leftist narrative would be that the right wing are a bunch of misogynists. Although they say that last one anyway, I guess. It's the people lashing out in anger and outrage for the fallen, for the sake of survival. While leftists love to chant shame, 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 despite them being the party of prostitutes, the real shame is the government allowing this to happen to their own people for the sake of good optics, and the tension being riled up between good immigrants and the native populace is also a direct result of the government allowing bad immigrants into the country to terrorize the local populace. The people cannot be blamed for their will to live. However, on the topic of the flaccid protests of the left, which, while annoying, are rarely violent, I have to condemn the burning of property and hurling of bricks, which happened in Belfast, and I think a couple other places as well, including the bricks thrown over Henry Noack. I know people are angry, and the easiest address to sign on that brick is the nearest police officer, but they usually aren't the ones at any fault. They didn't sign up to become party to murder, and if all the peacekeepers disappear, mayhem truly will reign. I'm obviously not suggesting to attack politicians either. I don't know which buildings were burnt down exactly. I've heard they were targeting immigrants, which you would assume, but they say that other houses got nuked as well. I don't know. I'm just saying that you're only hurting your own people by burning down houses and public transport buses. I mean, especially the buses. Like, I'm sure there's some Irish people, definitely people with a license revoked for DUI, if Irish stereotypes are to be believed, who needed that bus. Besides, the government probably gave the immigrants brand new Lamborghinis to drive anyway, so it's not like they needed the bus. Needless to say, you don't really want to crack some cop with a fist-sized stone, not to mention any random people or animals who might be struck. I mean, like, imagine like a dog or cat walks out and eats the brick. Like, you don't want that. But while I have to condemn the violence of the protests, I don't dismay the protest itself, unlike many leftists who are attempting to silence the voices of any anti-immigration conversation. Tommy Robinson, who has a lot of drama around him and has assembled rallies before, was blamed for helping to form the protest in regards to this, which he did, but it was just a protest, right? As far as I'm aware, all he said was to protest. Now, I get why they're blaming him, given that everyone else wore masks, but again, as far as I'm aware, all he said was protest. So why is the right being disallowed from protesting?
This is how fascism starts.
Isn't that what they say? Well, what about Musk? He also advocated for protesting all of this and obviously provides a social media platform on which to speak, and so people are saying that Musk is responsible for bricks being thrown and cars being set ablaze, trying to tie Musk to destabilizing the entire government in order to undermine their ridiculous fake Child Protection Act, which attempts to police the entire internet on a global scale. Who exactly is the bad guy here again? Is it the government trying to control the entire world, or the rich guy they can't suppress, giving the free world free speech? Just to let you know how ridiculous and farcical all of this is, even Reddit cheers for 4chan spitting in the eyes of the UK with their ridiculous child safety laws. Yet, people are saying that X needs to be shut down for this.
This is what fascism looks like.
They see free speech as a return to the Dark Ages. They can't stand hearing an opinion besides theirs and say it's radical extremists because they had spent so long in an echo chamber. And yes, X is heavily right-leaning now, but sites like Reddit and Blue Sky are terminally liberal. Yet article after article, sites like Wired or the New York Times attempt to run smear campaigns. Oh no, Musk is posting falsehoods about grooming gangs. Running defense for immigrants raping children is a great idea. Keep doing it, liberals. These leftists attempt to take away the free speech from their political enemies while simultaneously calling them fascists. So nauseating, especially when it's impossible to know whether or not the masked group of mostly men are actually protesters or something else entirely, making it very easy to label them, as the left has always done, despite them wearing masks as well. The New York Times has an article titled, "In the UK, a violent cycle, hateful attacks, right-wing agitation, and riots." Funny thing, the title fails to mention whom starts the hateful attacks. They only suggest that it's the right who's at fault. The right, as usual, is only responding to psychopathic murderers who are invading every country they're allowed into. The article states that when the attacker is an immigrant or a person of color, a malign, distorted narrative often explodes onto the internet, claiming then that the right-winger populists fan the flames into violent protests. Again, a person of color? No. An immigrant who is, by default, a person of color, because Americans don't go to Ireland and start decapitating people in the fucking street. It's an embarrassing lie to perpetuate months after Vikram Digwa murdered Henry Noack, and his instant reaction was to lie that Henry did racism, because he knew leftists would eat it up. And they did, for months, until the truth came out. I bet the left really regrets begging for police body cams now. Ironically, the right wing is getting more mileage out of BLM than the left ever did. Immigrant, though, yes, spot on with that. People are sick of their country being a luxury resort with all expenses paid for people who lived in a literal war zone days beforehand and either act like troglodytes with incredibly low IQ or have some sort of cultural PTSD that prevents them from acting like a normal person. What a shock that people aren't going to take a politician saying, "There's no place for cold-blooded murder in the UK. I'm shocked and appalled," as a proper response. especially when they hear it weekly, as one of them is sacrificed to the god of good optics on a more regular basis. By the way, the government having the pride and strength of yogurt is part of that cycle. They create a problem and either aren't doing enough to fix it or aren't transparent enough with what they are doing to reassure the citizens. Thus, they riot. The problem is simple. The Child Safety Act? Well, Chi Onwurah, I think I pronounced that correctly, Chi Onwurah, the chair of the Science, Innovation, and Technology Committee, has testified that the government hasn't done enough to dispel online misinformation, saying that the Online Safety Act was inadequate and wants the government and Ofcom to force social media companies to silence free speech during what they call crises. Crises? You mean an immigrant murdering a local? That's like every week, though, at least. So you just want X to be muted then, don't you, Onwurah? How familiar. What about Amr Anwar? Of Pakistani parents, but born in England, he moved to Scotland when he was 19 and is both a lawyer and an activist, two things that do not go hand in hand without bloodying each. He was campaigning the Stop the War initiative, which is trying to keep the UK out of military conflicts. Very odd for a Pakistani man who joined the Royal Air Force to try and keep the UK out of foreign conflicts. He's a trustee of the Time for Inclusive Education, a charity for LGBT inclusive education in Scottish schools. And he's a critic of a detention center for failed asylum seekers, a place where they hold people for deportation, and where liberal Karens stand out front in picket lines shouting,
Stop separating families.
with child's rights being leveraged to push the no borders agenda that liberals love so much. How familiar. And talking about the protest this Saturday, June 13th, 2026, he's quoted as saying, Saturday is about reclaiming our streets. Not a day for hate, but a celebration of our city and many cultures. Those who wish to cause mayhem are not welcome. So, a Pakistani man was born in England, moved to Scotland, and laid claim to the soil, stating that anyone who did not share his goal was not welcome. How familiar. Here you can see a comment by a Twasul Muhammad of Sudan, vocalizing her thoughts. She's lived in Northern Ireland for over a decade, and she's an anti-racism organizer from a Belfast humanitarian rights group, no less. How familiar. Well, let me ask a simple question. Why is there an anti-racism group organized by an African in Northern Ireland? This is a question I ask myself whenever I see an immigrant in a place of power. Is the intent innocent or not? Is it because they think racism is bad and they are trying to better the country, or is it so that they have a network of people in places of power, ready to accuse anything and everyone of being racist when need be? What rationale is there behind having foreigners come to a country and participating in an organization that commands the natives to accept and tolerate them? It benefits the immigrants exclusively, and they do it with the intent of accusing you of racism if you fail to comply. How familiar. Now, again, maybe their intent really is innocent, but it's also one that is very, very, very easily manipulated by third parties, and the outcome is the same. Demonizing the natives, which results in riots, doxing, threats, attacks, and thus a very easy-to-twist narrative that the natives are bigots and that they deserve to die. But though I use foreigners as examples, white liberals are the crux of the problem as they're the ones holding open the door. It's the leftist playbook through and through. Imagine that you go to North Korea and you create an anti-racism organization that specifically commands North Korean people what they are allowed to think and do, using morals as a method to manipulate them to your advantage. That's not immigration. It's colonization. You can wash the blood of the victims from the streets, but you can't bring back their lives. You can accuse everyone and everything of being a racist, a fascist, hard right, extreme right, whatever. Every breath is wasted. Your goal as the government is to appease people and prevent them from being violent. Then taking a stand against the violence is an error when the violence is in response to poor governance. That's your fault. Instead of incriminating your people to uplift yourself and deflect blame, you should fix what's causing the violence to begin with, which in turn means there's no violence being begotten. Instead, the leftist governments and the media, out of touch with reality as they are, insist that they can shift blame. There is some sanity bespoken, however, such as Reverend Jacob Mercer stating in so many words that citizens feel betrayed by their government, where some feel their religion is under attack. There's surely some racists in the crowd, no doubt, And they're likely racist because of these problems. But the problem was not manifested out of thin air by extreme radicals of the hard right. It's been a long time brewing, and the liberals are the cook. Look, at the end of the day, pretty much everyone condemns violent protests, violent racism, and so forth. The problem is the ones trying to put a mask on it. Britain's Minister for Northern Ireland dumbly claimed that somewhere in the UK there's probably a Sudanese surgeon saving someone's life.
There's probably a surgeon from Sudan operating on someone somewhere in the United Kingdom as we stand here this morning, saving somebody's life.
I mean, come on. This is tonally indifferent to liberal women telling political adversaries to imagine that they have a daughter, thinking that this is going to make them fetishize abortion and side with the left. Yeah, sure, but what if I imagine my theoretical daughter isn't a massive slutty liberal? What if I imagine all the liberals as a mental cancer who will persuade my theoretical daughter to become an awful person? And what if I imagine there is no Sudanese doctor? What if I imagine that all the Sudanese immigrants are just like the one who's trying to dismember people in the streets? Unlike my imaginary scenario with North Korea, which will never happen, migrant violence has already happened and will continue to happen.
But what's clear is how a very localized incident, one man, one knife, one attack, has tapped into a much broader issue. This question of identity. Who are we and who belongs?
No, it's not one man. Not even in that incident. It's two men. And even then, there are many attacks and many men and women and children. Is imagination the best you have to offer in response to people having their eyes gouged out, their throats slit, and their hearts punctured? The same minister defined the protests in Belfast as a truly shocking scene.
Britain's Minister for Northern Ireland says the violence is racist. Thackeray.
Thankfully, last night we saw less disorder in Northern Ireland, particularly it was concentrated at Glengormley, where water cannon were deployed to deal with those who were ripping up paving stones and throwing them at the police. I hope that means that people are reflecting on the truly shocking scenes we saw on Tuesday night, with people being burnt out of their homes because of the colour of their skin.
I guess he hasn't seen the video of Stephen Ogilvy being murdered before the self-same people who performed those violent protests, the citizens, saved him. I've seen it. That is what's truly shocking, and the citizens were the real heroes. Do you really think political platitudes will douse flames of anger fueled not by racism, but by pride and a desire to survive and protect people's friends, family, and their nation? If you honestly think the country will sit back and accept knife attacks have no place here, I'm shocked and appalled, then you're an imbecile. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please do the YouTube things.